Sorry about that, guys. Um, so where I was speaking to was the way that we are making our inferences from the data, and then we're testing them with deductive principles we already know. So seasons only occur in the temperate zone. And as well, you probably noticed it doesn't snow down in the tropics if you've read about it or you're from there or have visited there. So um, this is Alfred North Whitehead's two sides of the snake biting one another. We make our inferences, we test them against deductive principles. Okay, a couple of really important notes about this assignment. First, don't write fiction. I do not want to hear about your trip to discover the Wawa Wawa people and how you did the banana dance beneath the full moon with them and all of that stuff. That's fiction. If you're inspired, you can go and write a fiction story about this, but your task here is to do a hard-hitting inferential reasoning practice where you arrange the data in meaningful groups. And those groups are probably going to look like geography, social structure, agriculture, religion, spirituality, and don't forget arts. The arts are incredibly important for these people. They are amazingly accomplished. I've even sort of had this wild inference that this isn't exactly an undiscovered tribe, but it's actually a tribe of hippies who, in the early 1970s, when they saw everything going awry, they all loaded into their VW vans and drove off into some remote area and just like took all the best of literature and agriculture and everything else they could lay their hands on and disappeared from sight, and their children weren't taught where they came from. And so here they are plugging along, living in these huge artistic communes. You get the picture, right? Okay, that's one pretty wild inference, but I could make that in my conclusion, having gone over all the data, right? I could say, yeah, this is kind of wild, but, one hypothesis that we could make is, okay, but notice that's still a solid inference based on evidence. Do not write fiction, okay? Instead, you're going to be using a thesis statement in PIE. So I actually recommend for every paragraph, you dedicate it to a particular category that you've grouped the data into. So for example, geography. Where are they located? What's their land like? How do they use the river systems? How do they get water? Agriculture. Well, do they have irrigation? How do you know? What's the evidence to support it? And remember, through all of it, support your claims with evidence. That's the name of the game here. All right. So don't write fiction. And second, about your introduction, there can be a little bit of confusion about this. You're welcome to get a little creative with your introduction and describe how you encountered this data. And I had one student who gave a really good example of how to do this because he worked in a Starbucks, and that inspired him to write this account of how these bearded, scruffy-looking, bespectacled academics appeared at the coffee shop and were talking vociferously over these papers that they had strewn all over the table and debating things. And he's kind of keeping an eye on them. And suddenly they get this phone call and they all rush out the door and leap in a van and drive away. And they leave a little stack of papers sitting on the seats next to them. And on those papers is that list that you have in the assignment. And so what my student described, what he was doing was trying to reason out what kind of culture it was that these linguistic anthropologists were trying to describe with their list of characteristics. Okay, you can begin it as a news broadcast and say, newsflash, this just in, new discovery of, this is what is known thus far. Fine. A letter to a friend, a dear former professor that you had, you get the idea. So you can launch it off with a creative opening paragraph, but then you want to get down to business and get down to a well-structured analysis that has clear points, clear argument, clear evidence to support the argument, and of course, a thesis at the center of it all. Which brings me to my final clue for you, okay? I think this is a really cool riddle. And it has a lot of echoes of actual anthropological, ethnological work that has been done. So that's kind of a fun thing about it as well. And that's why I had you watch Wade Davis, his amazing TED Talk about the models of reality that different people experience and how our experience of the world is not necessarily normal or normative. That there are cultures, for example, such as the Barasana, that can learn a language by simply listening to it for a couple of days. And then they don't even start speaking it in a stumbling way. It simply starts to pour out of their mouth, fully developed. Or the Waorani, who can detect the smell of urine in their rainforest at 40 paces and not only tell you what the species was, but what the sex of the animal was that left that scent marking. These are models of reality, okay? These are the ways that human beings have evolved in quite different environments to understand it and master it. And folks, we're not all the same. We have very different structures of consciousness from culture to culture. And what we have here is a chance to unpack a pretty interesting model of reality or worldview, right? So one thing that I want to propose is that the sacred child is profoundly important for the Lost Tribe. And if you think about our own culture's understanding of childhood, it's kind of dire, it's kind of dim, you know. Scientifically, we tend to look at babies as a kind of like blob of protoplasm and precognitive brain cells, and we think our main job is just to change their diapers until they reach the age of reason, and then they can be useful in the economy. Well, I'll tell you, when my daughter came along, I wasn't seeing anything like that. She came in with a kind of awareness that had me a bit awestruck. No, she couldn't speak and she couldn't play the piano, but she had a quality of consciousness that actually suggested to me she was more awake than I was. And I was humbled before it. And I think we miss that in our children a lot because we're conditioned to not see it. Apparently, these people of the Lost Tribe are aware of something we're not. And so it can be fun to unpack what's the central model of reality which is fueling this culture. Okay, I made this really deep, didn't I? But, you know, it's a fun riddle. So besides dealing with the inferential nuts and bolts, okay, also have fun with some hypotheses and digging into it. Okay, see where it goes. All right, that's it. I hope this is helpful. Call me or write me or, you know, I don't know, send me a smoke signal or something if you need help. And good luck with your rough drafts.